Whoa!
Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-hosts Mattson.
Better read than dead.
Alec Burgess,
Let's get it.
and Dalton W. Bieber.
It'll get better before it gets worse.
That's right. We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead, hit that like, subscribe, follow button, the bell notification, all those buttons that help you keep up with all of our new episodes and get notifications, all that fun stuff. Tell a friend about us. We always love your help growing the podcast. We appreciate you listening, all that fun stuff. Today, we're reviewing Thor, Love and Thunder. It was released July 8th, 2022. It was written by Taika Waititi and Jennifer Caton Robinson. It's directed by Taika Waititi. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, Taika Waititi, Christian Bale, and Russell Crowe. Thor enlists the help of Valkyrie, Korg, and ex-girlfriend Jane Foster to fight Gorr the God Butcher, who intends to make the gods extinct. If you haven't seen this movie and you want to avoid spoilers, now's the time to pause the podcast, go watch the movie, come back, pick up where you left off. If you're okay with spoilers, or if you've seen the movie, hang out with us because we're about to spoil the shit out of this thing. Okay. There's going to be another rant from me in this particular movie, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you three.
Ready, JJ.
Dude, I'm telling you.
Literally has salt on
literally
screen.
has salt on screen. I'm okay with it because there's tons of salt for me this morning. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. What did you guys think of Thor, Love and Thunder before I go nuts?
Like, I'll give my just quick overview. Thor Ragnarok probably is my favorite Marvel movie. It took what Marvel did best. Took humor, took your endearing love of these characters and blended it into a compelling story that drove kind of the cinematic universe forward. This movie, because this director's name, JJ, can you say it again? Because I always say his name wrong.
Taika Waititi.
Say it one more time.
Taika Waititi.
There we go. I really like him. He has made some good stuff in this Star Wars universe. He's a good actor himself. To an extent, he has a funny voice. But man, I think he just leaned a little bit too much into what made Ragnarok good, and it became too slapstick comedy where it just felt very, not even at times very forced, extremely forced at times, especially to me at the beginning where I was like, this is not working for me at all. It made the acting seem just chaotic. Like Natalie Portman's character, she's a phenomenal actor. She sucked in this movie. She was horrible. And I don't think it's her fault. She's clearly a very good actor, but the way it was written, the jokes, to me, it detracted from it in a really bad way to the points where the emotional aspects of this movie that they were trying to harp upon didn't land nearly as much as I wanted it to. And it was because of the way they kind of inserted comedy. And I thought this was Marvel doing what they thought they do best, but doing way too much of it and it detracting on the other side. It's kind of like DC Universe leaning too much into the gore, the violence, the darkness, and they needed to come a little bit more to the light. Marvel leaned too much into the humor, in my opinion. Really detracted from the overall feel of the movie. I will say, me personally, I liked Christian Bale as Gorr the God Butcher. I thought pretty compelling villain. I liked the story, the motivations. That part was very well done. Of all the Marvel bad guys that I can think of, honestly, Gorr the God Butcher is really up there for a standalone movie. There may not, in my opinion, be a better villain than him because I thought he was very compelling. I really enjoyed any time he was on the screen. But just going back to it was just a movie that felt really disjointed due to the humor and didn't pull me in the way that I wanted it to.
Cool. Alec?
Let me tell you the story about the Space Viking. I loved this movie.
Of course you did.
I had so much fun with this movie. I mean, the quotability of this movie is top notch.
No.
Oh, yes, it is. And I'll have several during the podcast for you. Absolutely. You can
We'll also talk to a tiger, so this makes sense.
One more word from you, Mattson, and you're not invited to the orgy.
Jesus. In
Yeah,
a terrible Italian
with
I think,
how those
accent.
gods looked. Like, I'll stay out of it. I'll stick to Earth people.
Are you kidding me? The freaking Cronin god sitting on a throne of scissors because rock beats scissors
I did
is
laugh at that.
fucking genius.
I did
First
laugh
of
a
all,
lot at that, actually.
I did have one major problem with this, but we can get that later. But I really enjoyed it. I had so much fun. I was cracking up the entire time. This to me is the kind of Marvel I enjoy, where there's a little bit of Marvel and a whole lot of funny. So I don't have to know anything about the actual story that's happening, but I can still go and enjoy it. So I really enjoyed this movie.
Again, he talks to tigers, so take for what it's
Oh
worth.
my goodness.
That's funny. All right, Dalton, what about you, buddy?
All right, so first things first, like Mattson said, Thor Ragnarok will be the best Thor film ever. Probably one of the best Marvel films. But with that being said, I'm with Alec. I absolutely love this movie too. There's a little fist pump, boom.
Man,
He's just doing salt over Mattson.
there's no accounting for taste in
No,
this
but
podcast. But
I actually did like the humor too. I enjoyed it. I think it's like really messed up that they have infinity cones, even though Thanos erased half the population in that universe. But I still think it was hilarious. And Christian Bale, that was probably one of the best villains in the MCU, like Mattson said. Trying to think in particular, like if you can watch the villain and be like, I don't agree with him, but I understand why he's doing it. He's a great villain. Plus, when Christian Bale was announced, you know it was going to be good. So I'm looking at JJ. I don't know if he agrees with that. But yeah, there was a couple scenes, like I didn't really like the Zeus stuff, and I'm not excited with the after credit scene of who our next villain is going to be for Thor. I'm not really excited for that part, but other than that, I really enjoyed the movie, and I actually did like the humor pieces. And I would say Gorr the God Butcher. Doctor Strange was supposed to be the horror movie, but I think Gorr was probably scarier than any part of Doctor Strange. I'm not saying I was jumping out of my seat, but I could I don't know. There was more horror elements with him.
The show got dark. I mean, this is the first Marvel movie I can think that kidnapped and used kids, and these like shadow monsters and things. I wasn't expecting that, but I did quickly before JJ salts this movie entirely. Wanted to give a shout out to Matt Damon. Great job. I mean, I will say there's a lot of dumb jokes in this movie, but man, that part, that was funny. And I love that later on when they came in, like, I can't remember exactly what this was like. Do you think we need to make a play about this or whatever? Like, they didn't say no. That part was so funny.
oh man, I was happy to see Stubbs. So
My man Stubbs.
That's right. Look, I love Taika Waititi. I love Thor. I even can tolerate like Dark World, even though it's a pretty bad movie. But yes, Ragnarok was by far the best Thor movie, one of the better movies within the Marvel Universe. But Taika Waititi went too far with this movie. Like, I felt like I was watching an episode of a big, long episode of Things We Do in the Shadows, not freaking Thor. Like, it was... And here's what I feel like Taika Waititi did. He said, man, everybody loved the humor in Thor Ragnarok. Let me just throw shit at the wall and something will stick. Well, the problem is not everything sticks. And in my opinion, 75% of the comedy did not stick. If I had to listen to one more goat scream, I was going to lose my shit. The shit was funny at first. But when I start rolling my eyes every time the goats come on screen, you know you've done it too much. Like, it was too fucking much. And then on top of that, like, there were moments in the movie that were serious and were actually being played very seriously. And then this random ass Taika Waititi joke was thrown in the middle of it, and it ruined the moment for me. There were at least 3 times where the moment was just completely and utterly wrecked. And I was so mad about it because it's like, you have a very emotional setup here. You have kids that have been kidnapped. You have a dude that's having a crisis, that's been having a crisis of who he is for the last 6 movies he's been in. Probably one of the most tortured characters in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, considering the Infinity Saga 2 movies, that he was the key to why Thanos figured it out, you know what I mean, and was able to be successful at the end of Infinity War. So it's like, and I was okay again with the comedy if he had toned it back a little bit, but it was just too much, and it ruined too many strong emotional moments for me, that until the last 25 minutes of this movie, I felt like I couldn't feel for these characters because it was going to get interrupted with a shitty joke. Like, that was my big issue, is I wanted to feel for these characters. Like Mattson said, Natalie Portman's one of my favorite actresses, period. If not, she's top 3 for me. She's amazing. And you have this, and she's wasted in this movie. Like, because she would get these emotional moments, and I was very interested to see how they would play the Mighty Thor, because it was very comic accurate. That's Mighty Thor's thing, is she has cancer. Mjolnir, when she's holding it and she is Mighty Thor, heals her, but the cancer gets worse as soon as she's not Mighty Thor. So they followed that storyline very well, and it's a very emotional thing. But every time I would feel for it, except for the last part in the hospital, and then after that, there was some stupid ass joke thrown in that I'm like, fuck, it just ruined the
Well, they had
emotional
those
moment
dumb
for me.
catchphrases things, and that's why I was like, it just didn't work. Like, that felt so forced.
Yeah. And what was the actual one that worked at the end? I want to know that, but I don't get to know that. Why would that be kept secret? You threw out every other shitty line on the planet in this movie, but you didn't give me the good catchphrase. Somehow I don't think it was a very good catchphrase.
Catchphrase as a catchphrase is a pretty cool catchphrase, JJ.
Hey, you're quoting one of my favorites. I love that movie.
I'm
but-
coming back with movie quotes from not even the same movie.
Free
and it's
guy.
another one from Taika Waititi, so I'm okay with it. But
Jeez.
man, come on. Free Guy, that one knew how to play with your emotions and the comedy. This one didn't. It was so over the top. And can
Wait.
we just fucking, Russell Crowe's accent was horrible. What was that shitty Italian fucking god awful accent? Stupid.
Why did he have to sound like that?
I don't know. Apparently there were 2 different accents that they used, and they filmed all of his parts twice, because Taika Waititi didn't know which accent he wanted to use. Just fucking have the man talk.
Why can't he just talk?
Because that's not as funny.
And why?
It wasn't
so why?
funny.
No, none of that was that. All that was so stupid. Why didn't he die? Because he's Zeus.
Wow,
He
'cause
got-
he's a
He
god,
got
yeah, I mean,
pierced through the, but it went right through him.
Yeah, very little actually
Clean
kills the
wound.
gods, though. Yeah. Very little
But I-
actually kills the gods,
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess.
besides
it's
the
that.
necro sword.
Yeah,
So
what-
I will. Oh, go ahead, Mattson.
No. Go. Oh, go.
Oh.
Go ahead, Alec.
I was gonna add my little bit of salt to this movie,
Ooh.
because my favorite part of Ragnarok is when we first meet Korg and we find out that he's in prison, right, for a revolution, but he didn't print enough pamphlets, and only his mom and her new boyfriend showed up, who he hates, only to find out that no, he has 2 dads now.
Yeah.
And I was so mad that they retconned Korg's mom
Yeah.
and her new boyfriend, which was the best line in that entire film from my
It was pretty
perspective.
funny.
And they retconned it for 2 dads now. And I was like, what? Ooh, the disrespect put on Korg's mom.
Yep.
Yes, divorce
with you.
for the Cronins is a pretty big deal that they just write you out of their lives. But that was the salt I had for this. I was like, that was a huge problem for me.
My question with Gorr the God Butcher getting that cool sword and the villain or the whatever being that died in that oasis before in the god he killed at the beginning, just didn't. That was the only weird part to me, because that it was so easy to kill that god with that sword, and I'm like, well, why did this other villain die from this guy? I don't know. That part was a little weird to me, because I was like, it seemed like why did that person die if the sword is so amazing? And then it was that easy for Gorr to kill this god that had his hand around his throat. That was my only weird part about the origin, but it made sense. That was just a little tidbit there. But man, I really loved Christian Bale. Like, I just wanted to talk about him again. Like, really they really hit on the emotional aspects at that point, like him just waiting around, his daughter starving, died in his arms, crawls in the oasis, realizes that his god is just a complete doofus and jerk, and then he gets his sword that spits revenge, and he goes on a killing spree, and it really worked for me. And then when we got to know him more, and you could see the sword corrupting him and getting more darker by the minute, really awesome. I loved when he was on screen. Great job.
Yeah, I don't normally say this a lot about Christian Bale because me and Christian Bale have a very interesting history, and you guys have heard this in the podcast. I'm not usually a huge fan of Christian Bale all the time. Wasn't my favorite Batman even in the least. And there was a moment in the end when he said something, how dare you turn your back on me? I was like, he sounded like Batman.
Yeah, he did.
That was very distracting to me. But I loved him in this movie. And Dalton, the reason my face got a little weird is because when they announced him as Gorr the God Butcher, I groaned. I was like, oh God, because I'm not usually top tier Christian Bale. Like, it's hit and miss for him with me. He's either fantastic or he's not, in my opinion. But in this, he was the best part of this movie by far, in my opinion. Like, loved every second of what he did. Like, he was crazy, he was emotional, he was calm, and he was twisted. And I really,
He
except
was
for the whole
creepy
Batman line. Yeah, like
with the kids, he was like off kilter creepy. Oh, dude, like. But also, can we just say a boss move? If you can hold a dope sword and you just drag it on the ground, like, that is quintessential creepiness for me. It always looks cool. It was so cool. He had the hood and everything. I'm like, that is a video game villain I need to fight, because that's a dope G right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit. I enjoyed him a lot in this movie. I will say that I was looking forward to this movie for the Guardians of the Galaxy Thor crossover. Complete and utter letdown. Like, I was like, it was such a waste of my time. Like, that whole opening scene added nothing to this movie for me except for 20 minutes. Like, that's it. There was no value to that for me, except for Groot saying I am Groot like 3 times in his snotty teenage way. That shit was funny. But outside of that, to me, the Guardians of the Galaxy, it was such a waste.
Did Bradley Beal even voice his character? I don't even know if
Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper. Sorry.
Yeah, he did, but he had like one line is all.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't even remember. It just felt so worthless. Although I will say I love the ruler of that when the temple was destroyed and Thor was trying to kind of like apologize and over explain. He's like, let's just not talk about that right now. Like,
yeah.
But none of that really made sense. They tried to show like Zen Thor, and that was when it just felt so over the top and forced. I was like, they're just pounding me with this comedic, it just over the top, and it's like, this is not. It's too much.
Mattson, when you go from dad bod to god bod to sad bod, you have to go on a journey of finding yourself, which includes very much Zen and finding moments to relax and be yourself.
What the hell was up with Stormbreaker growing roots?
Maybe he'd been there for a while. I don't know. Put down roots, Matt. JJ, put down roots.
And he flew off like Harry Potter.
Yeah. What the fuck was that about? Like, there were so many weird choices in this movie that I was like, I always know when someone didn't do well with comedy when I'm done with a movie and I look over at Casey and I go, what the fuck did we just watch? Like, and I did that. I leaned over. I was like, what the hell what did we watch? Like, this was the weirdest. I was so disappointed in most of this movie. Yeah. I did laugh at Star-Lord like quoting Thor when he was giving his speech at the beginning. I think that was the only part that I really cackled, was because he was all excited about it and he's like, here it comes. Like, that was, but other than that, like that first 20-minute opening scene, I just didn't. Yeah, when the blue guy, the leader of the people, and then Mantis are the 2 funniest parts of that whole sequence. Like, that's you weren't successful, my friend, in my opinion. This movie, I wanted to love it, but
we haven't even talked about the MVP of the movie, and that would be the son of Heimdall, Astrid.
I did like that kid.
He was dope.
I will say, I loved the kids in general. Like when he gave them powers at the end, which
Yeah,
I don't know how
explain
he
that.
did.
Is that comically accurate? Because I was like, if he can do that, why isn't he doing that for like all of his MCU peeps?
Because he's never been that backed up against a wall before.
He
Got
fought
a bunch of
Thanos.
kids and shadow monsters.
Yeah.
I don't. Is that ever in any comic? Because I was like, well, that's like an OP move, and then not one kid died, obviously.
I don't think it's comic. I've never seen it, and I've read a lot of comics with these groups, but I think they're trying to say it was, if I had to guess, it's part of like the Zeus, the bolt that allowed him to do it, because it was the yellow lightning. It wasn't like just his blue stuff. So I think it was the combination of his powers with Zeus's lightning bolt. But yeah, I didn't like that they did it, but I loved how it turned out, because watching that girl with the rabbit
Laser
just
rabbit
screaming and laser.
No, the fairy princess with the wand. Where
Yeah,
she's jumping
she was
around.
Yeah, she like psycho face, and oh dude, I loved the kids with Thor powers. Like that shit made me laugh, and I had a great time.
But my
with
problem
that.
with stuff like that, JJ, that Marvel always has problems with is if he could do that, and then you're telling me he's got that kind of power, and then he can't go fight this Gorr the God Butcher by himself and kind of hold his own. Like I just struggle with that, because he goes right back in to fight him, and then he starts to lose, and then obviously Mighty Thor has to show up and come help save him. That balance at times I feel like Marvel does a poor job with, because Thanos was overpowered, then he didn't have the gauntlet, and he was still super, like those balances of power I struggle with at times, where like Black Widow, for instance, is fighting aliens from another universe, and we all know she's just a decently athletic human being, and I struggle with that at times, and I found myself being like a little bit like, well, if he's got that much power, why is he struggling so much at the same time?
Sure. No, I get that. And it's something that Alec and I've talked about in other movies, but not Marvel, is that sometimes Marvel, and sometimes a lot of directors in general and movie makers in general, focus on moments. And they're like, this will be a great moment. But the continuity and how it connects to an overarching story stops being a focus, because they're like, this will be a cool moment. And it was a really cool moment. But when you look at it from the bigger picture, there is a struggle there to go, how does that make sense in the overarching world of what we're talking about in that story? But for a moment, it was really cool. Like, I mean, it was enjoyable in that moment. But you're right. But I don't look at this movie, and this is the other issue that I have with this movie. And if you really want to get the salt out, this is where the salt really comes in for me. And that is, you're building, you probably built the only truly full-on successful connected universe in cinema history in phase 1, 2, 3, right? Phase 4 has felt really disjointed, and we've talked about this before.
Oh yeah.
And I know it's missing the magic, because you're not starting over. You're in the middle of a continuity, and you're having to start over. And you're never going to recapture the magic of the first 10 years of Marvel. You're just not, no matter how hard you try. However, this movie feels like it doesn't belong to me in this universe at all. The only reason it does is because it has characters from the past movies. This did not connect me to anything that had to, even the Doctor Strange movie, which was wildly disconnected in my opinion, still connected me way better than this one. This one felt like a standalone one-off that shouldn't be part of. This should be like call it the Legends series or something like that, since we talked about the legend of the space Viking so much. Have it be like a spin-off movie that comes and it's no longer while it's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or almost like a what if, or a Tales from the multiverse. And this is, you know what I mean? Separate it somehow, because it's very disjointed from the rest of the cinematic universe for me. And I was watching this the whole time going, how does this even connect? Because it doesn't feel like it connects to me, other than the characters are the ones that I know and love from these movies. That was probably my deepest seated issue is that it just didn't feel like it connected at all.
So I have a question for the saltier of the group. Because I saw a theory that this entire movie was told as a story from Korg's point of view, so that he would embellish it and tell the funny parts, and kind of was a storytelling. If they had
Sure.
made that kind of more apparent, or if this was something that they were leaning into, would that have made the movie better for you guys?
No.
I think in a way, yes. Like, I think I would have been more forgiving of the over-the-top comedy, because I think it would have made more sense, because Korg is a silly character, right? Like, it's like you go back to Ragnarok when we first meet him and the stories he's telling in the infinite hallway. Like, everything's a little stretched and a little weird, right? So I think I would have been more forgiving of the overall. I still don't think I would have loved this movie, but I think I would have been much more forgiving of the over-the-top constant comedy that didn't fit for the rest of the narrative for me.
To me, with how Christian Bale was starting to play Gorr the God Butcher as a director, I think you need to be able to realize, hey, I've got something good here. And they did. And I think this movie could have taken on a much more darker role in a sense and used comedy to alleviate some of that pressure, because when Christian Bale was on screen and they had those moments, like, you could feel the insaneness in the darkness and the twist in this. And I personally wanted to see more of that. And I think then some of those jokes that Marvel does so well to alleviate some of these dramatic, dark moments, that's what Marvel's best at. That's why they've been better than DC, in my opinion, because DC can never figure out when to insert a joke to alleviate some of the heavy, dark pressure that's put upon. But that's also what DC does better than Marvel at times, in my opinion, is they will lean into the realities of the darkness and what that means. And I was excited in this movie that they brought in kids and used it as a villain probably would do. Take the freaking kids, use them as bait. That Marvel never leans into that, and they did. And I think if they had done more than that and used Korg's jokes and things at some parts to kind of pull us back out and reset for another emotional deep dive, I would have liked to have seen more of that, because, again, like you heard me say this earlier, Marvel doesn't, in my opinion, have a lot of compelling villains, and especially in standalone movies. Thanos spanned a couple movies, and they did a good job building that up. But if you go back and I challenge my co-hosts to talk me back on this, but most standalone Marvel movies, or even some of the other ones outside of the Avengers, the villains aren't that compelling to me. And they had one here that I would have loved to have seen even more. And I think if you interject some of those jokes here and there, it could have driven the story a little bit better.
I agree.
That's fair. Dalton, you had mentioned the after credit scene with my boy Hercules.
Ted Lasso, Kent Roy.
Yeah, that's what. See, like,
I love that
I'm
character.
actually excited about Hercules, and not because I can't. But Hercules is a big part of the comics. And sorry, Dalton, I want to hear what you guys say here in a second. But the Hercules character in the comics is a big deal because he is kind of a chaos agent. Like, he's villain, he's hero. He's been in the Avengers. He's been against the Avengers. So it's interesting. But I love the actor that they chose to play him. Like, because he's my favorite character in the Ted Lasso show.
Is he just gonna start spouting off obscenities? Because
I hope so. Because it's just, it was too perfect. So sorry, Dalton. Go ahead, buddy. It's a great question from Alec. So
No, you're good. I don't know. I don't know if I feel like I just want to get away from the God stuff, I guess. I don't know. I think that's where I was leaning towards when I said I didn't like this end credit scene. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if this is coming before or after the Ms. Marvel episode, but I didn't really get into Marvel until the MCU, so I never really read the comics. So maybe Hercules is a pretty epic villain, but I don't know. Just watching that end credit scene, it didn't really hype me up. Like, oh, like we just had Gorr the God Butcher, probably one of the best villains, and it's Hercules, woo, who historically has been the good guy, at least like in Disney. So
yes, so Hercules swings both ways.
Oh, Hercules is like the worst dude in Greek mythology.
I was
aside
gonna
from
say-
Zeus. Zeus is the worst. His kiddo Hercules does a pretty good close second.
Yeah, I was gonna say the problem with the everyone's vision of Hercules is that it's been tainted by people taking the actual history of that myth of Hercules and making him a good guy. He's not a good guy. He is an absolute douche nozzle in actual mythology. He's an asshole. But that we've turned him into a hero because he does his like epic feats of bravery or whatever. Yeah, the labors. So we've made him this hero because he incidentally saved people by trying to build his glory to prove to Zeus that he was worthy son. But he's a dick. He's an absolute asshole. And in the comics, they lean into that. So like when he gets introduced in the comics, he is a douche. And then he comes around but he does everything for glory. It has nothing to do with wanting to be a good guy or a bad guy. It's just he does things for the glory of pleasing Zeus. And you can see that it seems like they're leaning into that with the post-credit scene, which I love because that's definitely a Hercules thing. But Brett Goldstein as Hercules, like when he stood up, that raspy voice and I was like, fucking A right. I love this choice. You're muted.
It seems like Chris Hemsworth is still all down to keep playing Thor. I haven't read and seen anything, and Marvel hasn't written him out yet. It seems like he's just going to keep going.
Who's going to replace him, though? That's the thing.
Yeah,
whoever replaces him is not going to be
well. I mean, like, I don't know if they're going to replace, but like they killed Robert Downey Jr., Captain America's Alec, something like, you could write him into the sunset kind of thing. But it doesn't seem like there's a plan to do that right now. And personally, something you said, JJ, is I think Marvel would be up the creek without a paddle if like Chris Hemsworth's gone, Thor, and take like Benedict Cumberbatch with Doctor Strange. I don't know if there's anything in this universe that even gets me watching right now. And that's where I'm a little worried. Like, and they need Thor to stay and they need him to be awesome. And that's why I think you said something where I didn't see a lot of connectivity between some of these other things I've seen. Like I am not seeing it. And as a comic fan, this was like a decent standalone movie, but these connections and these stars, like unless they really got to do something here in this movie, because these TV shows we're watching as well, while I know they're setting something up, it's so far distant and the connections for me aren't being seen that I do sit here and I am worried that I'm not going to be compelled. Like I thought at some point they were going to introduce some overarching villain and start building towards that like they did before. I'm just not seeing it. And I am starting to get worried because it's been enough time now. And I tried to give them some leeway, but I am worried.
Sure. So to answer the question, Chris Hemsworth has said he'll continue to play. He's open to play Thor as long as the fans want him to. And Taika Waititi excites me, but doesn't excite me. He said he'd come back for more as long as Chris Hemsworth was there. So I don't know what that means or where that goes from here. But what I will say is when they went and watched the premiere and there's the Thor will return thing at the end, both Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth did not know that was going to be there. Like, so they were like shocked when they saw it. So they don't know what that means for the future, but it's obvious that Hemsworth will still be around for at least a little while. And as long as fans will say he want him there, but I'm with you. I think he needs to stay at least for the time being and I think there are some characters right now that could, I like Shang-Chi a lot. Like, I think he could really play a big part as long as I think Benedict Cumberbatch is still around for a few more movies, at least on his contract. So Doctor Strange is there. I was really disappointed. I'm interested to see what they do with Scarlet Witch because her character as a good guy was very intriguing to me. And I thought something that could be really good. So I think there's a handful there. And my biggest issue, and I understand why it's a concern and why they're having a hard time with it, but it used to be just movies. So every character was in a movie or in a post-credit scene, so it was very streamlined and you knew where you were going to find your content. By adding Disney Plus shows, which I love, I think they're great, but you've also expanded the world to where if you're not watching those shows and catching on to the bigger picture, because your two main villains or your overarching villain right now that they've introduced came from the Loki show. So if you're not watching that and seeing Kang the Conqueror as part of that, you don't understand the new Thanos yet, right? Or you have very little understanding of where they're going with that. If you haven't been paying attention to the Darkhold and some of these demonic sides of where and even some of the governmental pieces that are coming from these shows, there's villains there that are part that they've really introduced more in the TV shows, and all of the movies of Phase 4 have been seemingly standalone villains or villain entities. So the only one to me that stands out in a movie right now is Shang-Chi with the 10 rings. That's still got the possibility to be a long-term thing. And then you've got the Celestials in the
Eternals.
So, which I thought was interesting that they tied those directly to Eternity in this movie. That was one thing with Eternity being introduced, that's a big deal there. So there's only one entity that's more powerful in the Marvel universe comic wise than Eternity, and that is the Living Tribunal, which we've also seen in the most recent Doctor Strange film. There was like a brief look as they were flying through the different universes. The Living Tribunal is like a 3-headed weird looking thing, and so you saw like their 3 faces you pass by as they were flying through the different universes. So we've seen the Living Tribunal, but we haven't actually been introduced yet.
So,
but then Eternity's the next most powerful being.
Theoretically, if Thanos had reached Eternity and said, "I want to eliminate half the universe," it could have happened that way too.
Sure. And they changed that. So Eternity fights against Thanos in the comics during the Infinity War, but because of the gauntlet, Thanos was the most powerful being in the universe at that point. So Thanos actually captures and imprisons Eternity when Eternity comes to fight him in the comics. So the Infinity
Stones trump anything?
Yeah, in the comics, when the Infinity Stones were together in the gauntlet, they trumped everything. He was the most powerful being. The Living Tribunal, Eternity, everyone came together to fight him, and
but they
took them getting the gauntlet off to beat him.
Yeah, too little, kind of too late, and maybe seen this version of the gods as well. They were like, "Oh, we're fine. It's not going to happen." Then they realized it's kind of too late, and then they were in trouble.
Yeah. Once he got the gauntlet, he was the most powerful being in the universe in the comics. So, but yeah, so it was. I was interested to see Eternity. I'm interested to see what happens with Gorr's daughter, because it's obvious through the reflection that she's a piece of Eternity. And Eternity had kids in the comics. Some good, some bad. He actually had, I think, like he had a handful. Empathy, Eulogy. I'm trying to think. Epiphany. Eon eventually dies.
I will say that little girl
Epoch.
in that scene at the end, I'm intrigued by that. I was like, okay, like
Sure.
that got those last couple of minutes. I like that. I was like, okay, like I could see myself watching this and seeing what happens here. I was interested.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Love and what she does and like how that goes. I think, because I think she's going to be a version of one of Eternity's kids.
Oh, so did you know by the title, JJ, that was going to kind of happen?
No, because Love's not. She's a new character as far as I understand, as far as that level. But it wasn't surprising when they introduced Eternity to me, because all of Eternity's kids are like emotions, with the exception of Eon, I think, and then I think Expediency. So like they all start with E's his kids. So that was weird. Well, not all of them, but most of the main kids. So again, Empathy, Eulogy, Expediency, Epiphany, and I can't remember there's 2 more besides Eon, and I don't remember their names, but his kids are concepts. They call them concepts. And so the concept of Love makes sense to me, that she's a spawn or a concept of Eternity. So it was interesting. So I looked at that, and then she has powers that her dad didn't have, like the eye beam thing that were, and one of his kids could do that, and I don't remember which one, but so I think they're just introducing Eternity's children or concepts in a way through her. So that's good. So, but I'm very intrigued. And that was actually Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter that
really?
played Love. Yeah.
That's why. Well, that makes it because I was gonna say, man, I was like, man, they smashed the chemistry, but now that makes
That's his daughter.
a ton of sense. So it felt as I'm sure that was awesome for him.
Yeah. Well, he's done that a couple times. He's brought family in. So at the end of Dark World, that the post-credit scene where him and Jane come together on the rooftop or whatever, and that was actually his wife, that because Natalie Portman wasn't available for the post-credit scene that was filmed later. So his wife, who about the same height and build as Natalie Portman, came in and played Jane Foster running across the roof. So
that's very cool. Well,
that's his daughter.
I'm intrigued with everything you said there. I will say Eternity visually very just mind blowing. In the same week that whole NASA images came out, I was like, man, like that Eternity looked cool. I was like, that's a weird, trippy thing.
Yeah, and that is exactly how Eternity looks in the comics, like almost like a 3D cutout. So I'm interested to see if they'll eventually. He has a sister named Infinity, so Eternity and Infinity. I'm interested to see if they'll introduce her. She's kind of a strange character, but they're getting into the big cosmic beings. Like I said, there's only one other, and it fits with the theme that they're going for with the universal, like the whole, again, the Secret Wars overarching storyline that I think will end up being at least one of your Avengers main come together movies is a Secret Wars movie. So, because Eternity embodies the Marvel universe itself. So, yeah.
And I think that's what it is for me, JJ. We're getting to a point where I need to see how this team up is going to start to form. And I think we've had enough of these movies now, TV shows, that I need it to be a little more in my face to see that progression.
Sure. I don't think you're going to get a team up movie until they officially start Phase 5. Like, I really don't. I think.
Wow, that's going to be hard.
Well, here's the question I had. Who are they going to build this around? Like their team building? Because in Phase 1, it was Iron Man, right? And he popped up in everybody's post-credit scene. It was either him or Nick Fury, right? That post.
Sure.
And it's like, hey, we're getting a team together. It was the same line. Putting together a team. Putting together a team. Putting together a team. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they haven't decided who they want to build it around. That's why we have all these standalone movies. I mean, I think the logical choice probably be Benedict Cumberbatch and Doctor Strange. Yeah. But I haven't really, I mean, you know, in the dark dimension or whatever, just doing his own thing. So it's kind of weird to see, like, if they do have this team up planned, like, who's going to be the one who kind of puts the team together?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because Thor's teams, his Revengers or whatever, they're just like a fantasy football team pick. Just straight up.
No kidding. Yeah, I don't know. Should be interesting. All right. Dalton, go ahead, buddy.
Oh, I'm just thinking because obviously I think we're getting close to the end of Phase 4. We're getting Phase 5. And like you said, I don't think we're going to get a team-up movie until Phase 5.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're doing like Phase 1, where it's like just these bunch of origin stories. Like even with Spider-Man and Thor, where we already knew them, it's like Spider-Man's being reborn into this new Spider-Man character, and Thor, you know, is refinding himself again. So I think it's just a lot of origin stories, with the exception of Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's where we're leaning toward. Even like Loki, like the Loki series is like, it's a whole brand new Loki we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like right now it's a lot of origin stories, meeting these new characters, and then I feel like the team up movie, when it happens, it might be like Infinity War, where like they're just scattered all over the place, and they're just gonna have to like eventually just all come together at one point.
Yeah.
But I think eventually it's gonna be like a multiversal thing. So I think Kang will definitely be there. I'm interested. I'm also thinking, like, would they bring Galactus? If I am saying his name right?
Yeah, you are. And I don't know. I think I don't think we see Galactus until, because he was such a Fantastic Four villain. Like, he was always big in the Fantastic Four piece. So I think maybe he'll be introduced when they bring Fantastic Four into the mix, which they're working on. So I don't know. I mean, I think you kind of have to at some point.
I mean, especially because they are bringing Fantastic Four. So, I mean.
Yeah. And Galactus was always a Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, that whole universe piece. So I think you'll eventually see it. But I think we've reached a point where they're walking down dangerous waters because it's hard to ground anybody in a level of reality anymore. Like, everything's cosmic and everything's huge because Thanos was so big that you can only go up from there. And Kang's a great choice. But once you break down Kang, now it's like, now you're moving into big stuff, man. And that's like Galactus and Eternity and Infinity and the Living Tribunal and the Celestials. So everything's very huge scale. So except for Doctor Doom. I mean, that's the other piece that I'm waiting on is Doctor Doom. They've had little teeny hints, and he's a big part of the Secret Wars narrative. So I don't know. He could be another one that, and Doctor Doom has very, very big power levels once he gets to that point. So, all right, well, let's rate this thing. I'll go first. Man, I freaking love Thor, but this movie really hurt me in the soul. Like, there were so many good parts to it that when it was good, it was really good. But when it was bad, it was so bad, in my opinion. And the comedy was forced, and it was over the top forced. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this movie in general. There were some good parts. I'm going to say not one of my favorite Marvel movies, barely a middle of the road movie for me in general. I'm going to give it a 2.5, and I'm going to move on from there. I don't have a lot more to say about this movie. It frustrated me, and then there were great parts that I loved. So there it is. Mattson.
Yeah, I've said a lot already, so I'm with JJ. 2.5 for me. You can listen to what I said earlier, but jokes didn't land predominantly throughout the movie. What saved this movie for me was Christian Bale. Again, great job as Gorr the God Butcher. Really enjoyed the villain there, but I just think they tried to take Ragnarok and do it ×2, and it in a lot of ways fell a little bit on its face.
Agreed. All right, Dalton.
All right, I'm going to be the opposite end. I actually really enjoyed this movie. I like the comedy. Maybe that's just because I like corny, funny things sometimes, and I just like the cheesiness. And like I said, I think Gorr was probably one of the best villains. He really stood out. He was the best part of this movie. And I did like the whole Jane Foster thing. I like how they tied in, like, Thor told the hammer to protect her, and that's what the hammer did. And just to have Mjolnir back, I hope I pronounced that right.
Mjolnir.
Yep,
Mjolnir.
So I think there were some cheesy parts. I think it was stupid how, like, Stormbreaker was his own person and was like jealous and all that. But with all that being said, it was no Ragnarok, but I would still give it a 4-star. I'm being bold. I'm doing 4-star.
Wowza. I like it. All right, Alec, bring us home, buddy.
So I am full of 100% grade A whiz cheese. So I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I'm actually surprised, though, Mattson, that you gave it such a high score, because there was that whole 20-minute stretch of black and white in there. And the entire time I was watching it, I was like, oh, Mattson's going to say something about the black and white in the show.
There was actually some blue in there with the
a little bit of
lightning.
Yellow. But there was a lot of black and white in there, Mattson. There was lot of black.
Yeah, but didn't act like a prototypical black and white movie with characters standing in the same scene for 10 minutes.
There's no color
running
happening.
Their mouth.
That
and
entire fight scene was just the worst because I couldn't focus on the cool colors.
Oh, don't even get me started. Stupid black and white. Served a purpose. It wasn't just we didn't have the technology to make human beings look like they actually did.
Yeah.
Maltese
If
Falcon.
it served a purpose, they wouldn't have the color in there where they did. So I really enjoyed this movie. I'm not going to go quite as high as Dalton. I think it was a 3.5. Very good, solid movie. I will be watching it quite a few times when it comes out on Disney Plus to stream, just because it is hilarious to sit back and laugh to. Especially the goats. I loved the goats.
Fuck the goats.
That was the
Like,
best part.
Worst.
JJ, I want to watch this movie again because I want to watch Christian Bale, but then Alec just brought up things that I don't want to watch again. Like that goat thing, seeing that at home, like I would just be like, no, I've been done with this.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna watch it again because
I won't.
There's so many things that I don't care to see again.
Yeah.
That's insane. I will watch this again.
Yeah, I won't.
So much.
I'll YouTube the Christian Bale parts sometimes, like if I want to watch, because especially when he's talking to the kids in the prison, like sneaks up behind him. I'd watch that scene again, but I wouldn't watch this movie as a whole again.
Unbelievable. You miss out on so much good stuff.
No, I didn't miss out on anything.
Yeah, oh, you would. You totally would. Sif's left arm just being in Valhalla. That was great. So I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. 3.5 for me. I will be watching it again and again and again.
Oh boy.
We didn't even talk about how Korg's husband was Dwayne.
Yeah.
That was
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah, and then there was like even memes coming out of like him with the mustache posing like the old Dwayne Johnson with the fanny pack. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Pure
gold. Pure comedy gold.
It would have been funnier if they named it Kevin and it was like Kevin Hart or something. Then that would have just been so. It would have been on brand for this movie. Yeah, it's just stuff like that that I don't need to see again. The only goat one that made me kind of laugh a little bit, even after it was already there's when they actually hit the planet that they were going to, and they just ran into it. I was like, all right, I would have screamed there too. So that was funny.
Yeah, the screaming goats were too much. Yeah. All right. Well, there it is. Dalton, tell everybody where they can find you.
If you want to find me, I'm on TikTok at Dalton W. Bieber, and I'll be posting content very shortly. I plan on just busting through a lot of stuff on the microphone at work, so plan on more content soon.
Love it. Mattson, what about us? Where can they find us?
Yeah, I'm hopeful we're gonna have a X-Men related one, Dalton, as we aforementioned in our previous podcast. But where can we be found? Most importantly, is on TikTok. Alec doing big things over there, roasting his co-hosts, eating weird concoctions, talking to tigers, throwing out fan theories from these podcasts. Good times all around. So definitely come check us out on TikTok. Look at our social media posts to see what we have reviewed and will review. Check us out at whatsourverdict.com to see what's on the docket, or just come listen to us. As always, we appreciate when y'all suggest things that we want to record. Charles, you are on the docket with, what is it again, Boss Baby 2? Or
Baby Geniuses 2.
Baby Geniuses 2. Jeez. I think we'll record that in a couple of weeks. So it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also really excited for the month of August because we're going to do some different stuff, bringing in some conspiracy theories, talking about some cool stuff, some dumb stuff. It's going to be interesting. So we're excited to see what y'all think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mattson. Yeah, there it is. Thor, Love and Thunder. With that, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!